All right, welcome back. We all had a great weekend. Today we're continuing our review of our latest RBT practice exam, where we're going through the next set of questions and breaking them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please subscribe. We would really appreciate it. If you're looking for our proven study materials, please check out rbtexamreview.com. We are the leader in RBT prep. We offer 3 practice exams, a test with study guide, and our combo pack, which is our best deal. As always, questions, comments, please let me know. I'd love to help. Work hard, study hard. Let's get to our questions. Question 1. RBTs can increase the effectiveness of reinforcement if they do which of the following? Okay, there are different ways we can increase how much behavior is impacted by reinforcement. Not all reinforcement is made the same. So if we want to increase the effectiveness of reinforcement, what should we do? A, wait at least 10 seconds before delivering reinforcement. What's the golden rule of reinforcement? We need contiguity, meaning the closeness of the reinforcer to the target behavior matters. As soon as our target behavior happens, we want to be delivering that reinforcement. The longer we wait, the bigger chance that we reinforce something other than our target behavior. 10 seconds is way too long. It's too big a gap. There's too much of a chance that another behavior is going to occur that we're going to inadvertently reinforce. B, only use things the client likes as reinforcement. Do we pick reinforcers based on what the client likes? We don't. We pick preferences. We do preference assessments to determine what the client likes. We identify reinforcers based on how it changes behavior. Think about negative reinforcement. If we're removing an aversive, the client doesn't like that thing, but it's still serving as reinforcement. So be very careful about the idea that reinforcement is only what they like and punishment is only what they dislike. That's not what we're looking at. How does it change behavior? C, deliver reinforcement as soon as the target response occurs. Perfect. It's what we talked about in A. We want contiguity. We want closeness. We want to be delivering our reinforcement immediately, as close as we can get to that target behavior happening. That will increase the effectiveness of our reinforcer. And then D, use a punishment procedure in conjunction with the reinforcement. Not necessarily the case. You don't have to have punishment to go along with reinforcement. Reinforcement works great standing alone. When we think about extinction, when we think about punishment, you want some other form of intervention to go along with those things. But with reinforcement is a fantastic thing even by itself. Our answer here is going to be C, contiguity. You want to deliver reinforcement as soon as the target response occurs. Cameron hears a phone ring, so he picks up the phone. House talks to Cameron over the phone. What is the behavior in this scenario? Be careful here, right? This is a very, very straightforward A, B, C, antecedent, behavior, consequence question. So treat it as such. Don't get confused with all the moving pieces. What do we know? We know Cameron heard a phone ring. We know Cameron picked up the phone. We then know House talked to Cameron over the phone. What is the antecedent? Well, Cameron heard a phone ring. It's the SD, signaling reinforcement for picking up the phone, which is the behavior. As a consequence, House now talks to Cameron over the phone. What is the behavior? Is it House talking to Cameron? In this situation, we're looking at this ABC scenario. House talking is the consequence. And this is where we need to be very careful in behavioral scenarios. We have to identify what behavior are we looking at. In this case, we're clearly looking at Cameron's. It's clearly an ABC. Now, House talking is a behavior, but in this case, it's a consequence in response to Cameron's behavior. Okay, so it's actually a consequence. Hearing the phone is the antecedent. It is the SD. It's what causes Cameron to pick up the phone, which is actually the behavior. The antecedent, Cameron hears a phone. The behavior or the response is he picks up the phone. The consequence is someone talks to Cameron, in this case, House. House talks to Cameron. The behavior in the scenario is Cameron picking up the phone. Which of the following would be the least appropriate way to identify a potential reinforcer? Okay, we talked a little bit about this in question 1. Remember, we have preference assessments and we have reinforcer assessments. What's the difference? Preference assessments identify things the client prefers, things the client likes, things the client enjoys. It doesn't necessarily identify reinforcers. From a preference assessment, we then go into a reinforcer assessment where we take the preferred items and see what impact they have on behavior. That's how we identify reinforcers. The question is asking us, what is the least appropriate way to do this, to identify a potential reinforcer? A, use a stimulus that reinforces the client's brother. Does a stimulus that reinforces somebody else really have anything to do with our knowledge of the client? It does not. That's very bad assessment. It's very lazy assessment. Just because it's the client's brother doesn't necessarily mean that same stimulus is going to reinforce the client. I mean, many siblings can't stand each other. And that client, out of spite, might not want to work for whatever is reinforcing the client's brother. Client's brother and their reinforcers have nothing to do with our client. So far, A is very inappropriate. It is not appropriate at all, a way to identify a potential reinforcer. What about B? Observe what happens to the client's behavior when the stimulus is delivered. Well, that's ideal, right? We're actually observing behavior change. B is great. C, interview the client and ask what they would want to work for. Now, an interview is not going to be enough to identify a reinforcer, but we're saying potential reinforcers. And interviewing the client and asking what they would want to work for is way better than just picking something the brother likes. At least this way, the client is telling us, hey, I would work for these things, okay? And if they're going to work for it, it's changing their behavior. So C is fine, as is D, interview the parent and find out what motivates the client. Again, it's not direct, it's not perfect, but for a potential reinforcer, it's not as bad as just picking something the sibling likes. At least this way, we talk to a source who theoretically knows what's going to motivate the client. B, C, and D are all at least okay ways of identifying a potential reinforcer. A is by far the least appropriate way, going to the client's brother's room, picking something the client's brother likes, and taking it away to use with our client. It tells us nothing about the client themselves. We're worried about the client. We're not worried about the client's brother, the client's friend, anyone else. Of the following, which is not a critical component of punishment? Okay, another not question. We have to be very careful. We had a least question. We had a not question. You've got to kind of change the way you approach and think about them when we have these least and nots. Okay, we're looking for a different type of answer here. Meaning, if it's not a critical component, 3 of these will be critical components of punishment. So let's attack it that way. Let's find 3 critical components of punishment. We know punishment decreases behavior. We know punishment is a consequence. We know punishment can be positive or negative. Punishment needs to be of a high magnitude. It needs to be delivered continuously. We know all the things about punishment. So let's try to find these components. A, the punishment must occur after the response. Well, since punishment is a consequence, we know for sure it's critical that punishment follows the response because it's a consequence. A should be very obvious. B, the punishment must be something the client finds aversive. Think back to our prior question. Reinforcers. Do clients have to prefer reinforcers? No, we don't care. It doesn't matter. All we care about when deciding if something is punishing or reinforcing is how it impacts the behavior. It doesn't matter. Client likes it, client doesn't like it. Does it change the behavior? That's all we care about. Being an aversive is not at all a critical component of punishment. C, the punishment must be delivered on a continuous schedule. That is true. Okay, punishment is on an FR1, meaning as soon as the behavior we're punishing occurs, we deliver punishment. It varies from reinforcement in that aspect. Reinforcement can be on all kinds of schedules. Punishment, every single time the response occurs, we should be delivering punishment. The punishment must decrease the future behavior. Of course, that is the entire idea of punishment. That is what punishment is. It's a stimuli added or removed that decreases future behavior. The only non-critical component of punishment is going to be B. A punishment must be something the client finds aversive. Blake is a 10-year-old with severe deficits in fine and gross motor skills. His parents want him to start requesting things like food and the bathroom, but he has never spoken any words and barely makes any sounds. What intervention would be best to teach Blake to mand? Okay, I actually ripped this question from some of our BCBA questions, so it's a little more challenging. But challenging is good, okay? If we don't challenge ourselves, we never know how much we can push ourselves, and we're never really going to gauge how much we've improved. Okay. So if this one is challenging, that's okay, right? But it's going to teach you some skills. First, what is the question asking? The question wants to know about teaching Blake to mand. And a mand is just a request, right? So we want to teach Blake to make a request. Even if you don't know what a mand is, you should have been able to deduce that from information given. So what information is given? Well, Blake is a 10-year-old with severe deficits in fine and gross motor skills, meaning small motor movements and large motor movements, severe deficits, severely disabled or severely struggles with those things. But his parents want him to start requesting things like food in the bathroom. He's never spoken any words and barely makes any sounds. So here we have a child, severe deficits in fine and gross motor skills, with zero communication, and his parents want him to make requests. How are we going to teach him to do that? Now, you have to put on kind of your analyst shoes here and think about it. Again, this is supposed to be a hard question. Okay, that's the entire idea. So A, have Blake request a bathroom by saying bath. Now, we have a 10-year-old who's never spoken any words and really makes no sounds. What are the chances we'll be able to teach him to say bath in a reasonable amount of time? Probably not very high. Probably not going to be the best intervention to use at first. Teach Blake sign language so he can communicate all his needs. Well, ignoring the fact that we would have to know sign language, we would have to teach Blake a brand new language on its own before we can even start teaching things like bath. Blake has poor fine and gross motor skills. It might be very difficult for him to sign. Sign language really makes no sense given what we know about the client and our current resources. C, show Blake how to exchange a picture for access to the bathroom. Okay, exchanging a picture doesn't require any sort of sound or verbal communication. Even with severe deficits, we could probably find a way, as long as Blake can do a simple pincer grasp or just pick up a card in general, he can exchange it. Okay. C is going to be a lot more feasible, a lot more realistic, and a lot more low tech than both A and B. So far, C is the best. And then D, teach Blake how to type the word food. Kind of the same issue as sign language, right? Not only are we facing deficits in fine and gross motor skills, we have to teach Blake to type, assuming he doesn't know how. Even if he does, we still need to teach him to type the word bath, or I should say food, when it's appropriate, okay? Given our information, the intervention that's going to be best to teach Blake to mand is going to be C, showing Blake how to exchange a picture for access to the bathroom. Again, that's more of a BCBA question. So if you got it right, fantastic. If not, don't stress it too much, right? But it's always good to continue to push and challenge ourselves. Margarita deprivation during the week makes you want margaritas even more come Friday night. Deprivation is an example of what? If you've been studying with me a while, hopefully at this point you start to see words that jump out at you and start ringing alarm bells. You see the word deprivation, an alarm should be going off. You should be thinking motivating operations. You see makes you want, more alarms, thinking motivating operations. And as soon as you read deprivation as an example of what, you should already be thinking motivating operations. Because what are motivating operations? Motivating operations have to do with deprivation and satiation. They increase or decrease the value of consequences. In other words, they make you want or not want something. In this case, you deprive yourself of margaritas throughout the whole week. When you get to Friday night, the value of margaritas has skyrocketed because you've deprived yourself. This deprivation is not a discriminative stimuli. A discriminative stimuli for margaritas would be the margarita, right? Or the waitress or the sign that says margaritas here. Just because we want something doesn't mean we can have it. And that's the difference between an MO and an ST. This deprivation is obviously an example of motivating operations. It's not a pre-MAC principle. Okay, it's not grandma's law. We're not using access to a highly preferred response as reinforcement, and it's not high P request sequence. We are not giving a lot of low effort, high probability requests in a row. This is the idea of a motivating operation. Again, as soon as you see deprivation or satiation, as soon as you see want, okay, we need to be thinking MOs. We need to be thinking motivating operations. Differential reinforcement can lead to what? I like this question because differential reinforcement, we teach the concept. It's a hard concept to grasp, but nobody really, or a lot of people, when they start, I should say, don't really understand why we do it. Okay, because the whole idea behind differential reinforcement is we're trying to essentially teach a couple different skills. Okay. Yes, we're trying to increase or decrease behavior as well, but specifically, it can lead to two very important types of skills. So differential reinforcement can lead to what? Does differential reinforcement lead to punishment and reinforcement? It doesn't lead to it, okay? Reinforcement is a component of differential reinforcement. Punishment shouldn't be. Maybe it sometimes is if it's done a certain way, but it really shouldn't be. Either way, differential reinforcement doesn't lead to these things. These are components of it. What about discrimination and differentiation? Yes, differential reinforcement leads to the client being able to discriminate stimuli or differentiate responses. When we start reinforcing one thing and not the other, we're going to start discriminating and we're going to start differentiating. Differential reinforcement is a fantastic way and one of the key ways we teach discrimination and differentiation. Differential reinforcement leads to discrimination and prompting. Again, prompting might be a component of it, but it doesn't necessarily lead to prompting. And then reinforcement and extinction. Reinforcement and extinction are the key components of differential reinforcement, but it doesn't necessarily lead to them. Differential reinforcement it teaches discrimination and differentiation. Nate throws juice at his mom when she tells him to floss his teeth. The mom hates having juice on her, so she leaves Nate to dry off. When she leaves, Nate goes and watches television. Nate never throws juice when he is watching television. The function of Nate's behavior is most likely what? All right, harder function question than usual. Okay, it's kind of tricky. Up to this point, we've really talked about functions as being a singular thing. Every behavior has one function. Well, that's not necessarily true, okay? Some behaviors might have multiple functions, maybe at different times, maybe presenting at the same time. It's possible. In this case, what do we know? We want to find the function of Nate's behavior. We know Nate throws juice at his mom when she tells him to floss his teeth. She then leaves Nate to dry off and Nate escapes. So immediately when you see Nate throws juice at mom leaves, Nate leaves and goes watch television, think escape, right? That's the obvious one. However, it also says Nate goes and watches television. Nate never throws juice when he is watching television. Now, maybe Nate was trying to escape from flossing, or Nate also got access to the television. So maybe Nate throws juice for television. Not really sure, right? So, what is the function of Nate's behavior? We said it's possibly escape. It's not attention, okay? It's no indication that he wants mom's attention because mom leaves him alone and he's fine. What about tangible? It certainly could be. Nate escapes from floss and he also gets access to television. So the function of Nate's behavior could be escape and tangible. We can't just pick escape when we have this tangible piece in here, okay? So escape and tangible is more likely than just escape and is definitely not attention or automatic. Why is it not automatic? Automatic means alone. Nate does this in the presence of another person in response to a change in the environment caused by another person, making it not automatic. Finally, the three major parts of a functional behavior assessment are, think about FBAs, think about the study guide. Okay, what are our three major parts? Well, first, we want to interview and we want to get data from teachers, from parents, from brothers, sisters, everybody else. That's going to be indirect. We then want to watch the client. We want to take event recording data, ABC recording data, narrative data, and directly observe the client. Finally, we want to use some sort of functional analysis to identify the function. Those are the three major pieces of a FBA. So if we look at A, indirect assessment, functional analysis, ABC recording. Now, ABC recording is a type of direct observation, but it isn't necessarily a major part of it. So be careful. B, ABC recording, event recording, functional analysis. Well, ABC recording and event recording are both, again, types of direct observation, direct assessment. So we have to be careful, right? We're looking for the major parts. ABC and event recording are types of direct observation, but they're not the major parts. C, indirect assessment, direct assessment, and direct observation. Direct assessment and direct observation would be essentially the same thing. So it leaves us with D, direct assessment, indirect assessment, and functional analysis. These are our three major parts of our FBA. All right, hope you enjoyed. Please check out rbtexamreview.com. Subscribe if you haven't already. Questions, comments, let me know. I'll see you Wednesday for our RBT practice questions. Work hard, study hard. Talk to you soon.